Alright guys, welcome to the Red Report. In this show we take the news and happenings from around the verse, ball it all up and bring it to your little space face. If you enjoy these shows, please consider liking, subscribing, possibly becoming a member. Let's get on with the show. First up was this from Hoodie Weather on Reddit. This is a visual representation of your hangar. This is you. This is where the ship should spawn per hangar size. Such a good idea. Such a simple yet excellent idea. I would even go further and say if you bring your ship up from the freight elevator, ace up, it would be here, next to the freight elevator, where you need it to be. I know, sometimes I just don't know where it comes from. Definitely wasn't from, just the first couple of comments. Definitely brained that one out myself. Asphalt Expert, I created a language pack to detect component stats faster. This is freaking fantastic. I haven't installed it yet, but I fully intend to install this because, look, apparently there's like a file that you can change or switch out that normally just deals with localization and languages and stuff like that. But you can officially edit this to your own liking. It's also very handy in the ASOP terminal for the ships being ordered in the way that you would want, so your favourites at the top. All the links will be below, but yeah, CIG's definitely came out and said that this is fine, so it should be pretty safe, and it doesn't seem too complicated to pull off. Thank you Asphalt Expert, you get 10 legendary points. An update on the Anvil Aerospace Osprey fan concept for sitcom. Smaller than a cutlass, dude made this to practice learning Blender back in 2020. The Anvil Osprey. I like it a lot. In January I successfully modded the Anvil Aerospace Arrow into Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Using this knowledge I was finally able to fly the Osprey. Absolutely epic stuff. Stoic Sunbro. Well done dude, this is cool as hell. Engineering gameplay in a nutshell. Okay CIG, you know Gray can do it, the ball is in your court. Yes. That's some heavy Star Wars looking thing. Bro hasn't messed about with this edit, look at that, he's just literally thumped it right in there. Still, we get the idea. A Mercury Star Runner but flown from the side, honestly that would be so cool. Nice one, a Caradrin, love to see it. The real use for the Reclaimer's rear elevator. Oh no. No, this is the last thing that we want. We do not want the salvage bros to have access to freaking deployable swarms, guys. They're already too overpowered as it is. I disagree with this. If you're new to the game, don't ever piss off the salvage bros. They will just appear like some South American taxi mafia and just ghost your whole shit. Sir, your account has been hacked. Me, my Star Citizen account, your bank account, sir. Yeah, I love it. This is the game I dreamed of in 1984. Yeah, it has come a long way, hasn't it? It's quite easy to get bogged down in the day-to-day bugs and stuff like that, but every now and then when you take a step back, it is pretty impressive what's been achieved here. Effective Cheetah 705 it was a great post, dude. Gave me hope. Lego RSI Polaris. See, I love it when they're just little dinky things like this. Oh, look at that! For some reason, the smaller it is, the cuter it is, the better it is. Oh, it's got an interior and everything. Awesome, man. Is that the engineering bay? Incredible. Yeah, nice work, dude. That hammerhead. Who is this? I don't know how to say that, buddy. I feel like it should be obvious. Forge Builder? 40CH Builder. That's what we're going with. I sound old. You made me sound old, bro. I got it. Well editing. It's 4Tech Builder, innit? In the bruv. This headphone stand. That's awesome. Awesome stuff. This is Mighty Heidi. She's always got the coolest stuff, like. Mighty Heidi's a freaking legend. Remember when the 400i had a sunroof with a pool? What, for real? I did not know that. Oh, there's no more pictures. Yeah, I love seeing all these old things. Look at the front. Did that fold out on the other side as well? It's supposed to. It's mad some of the things you see. Like from before my time, before me coming into the game. Good punk too, cheers for this dude. Next one is the real studs of Star Citizen. And there's a few here, Mr. Really Big Spender guy, Mr. Solo Ship Flyer guy, Mr. PvP Griefer guy. These are awesome, they're little songs. I didn't have time to ask this guy if I could use his video. Plus they're really short, so like by the time I showed you, you would have seen the whole thing and wouldn't go and watch it over there. But you need to see these. Freaking hilarious. Next up is the Herald anti-ship meta by For Science. These shows are absolutely spectacular and just involves a bunch of org guys getting together with a ship not a lot of people like, and you know, seeing how much mischief they can cause. And the results are freaking insane. Absolutely insane. It's like something from a freaking nightmare. Sleep paralysis demon. For example, imagine taking a bounty, right? Flying out and finding yourself up against this menacing cloud of Drake. You have been heralded. All the links are below, remember? Kuroshiro was asking about the Genesis system and how different things are procedurally generated. The rock scattering algorithm and how basically a valley decides to be a valley and a mountain decides to be a mountain. Hi Pyremeus, reply is broadly correct. Genesis models natural rules at a fine scale, such as deciding which plants will grow there and how rocks are distributed based on large scale geologic datasets, and then allows the results to be viewed from orbit. But the actual source data is largely up to the artist to decide. And although they may use simulation and procedural tools to aid this, they can still basically draw continents wherever they please and pick the temperature at any specific location. Vegetation uses rules based on soil quality, temperature, humidity, light availability, competition, reproductive rate and more. Trees will dominate if the conditions are right, but lower quality soil or cool temperatures are likely factors for fewer trees. Also, we pick per planet which species are available, so each planet will have a unique combination. For rocks, the artists generate rock aggregate size maps, geology type maps and soil depth maps. The offline simulators for these use erosion and weathering to determine how the rocks and soil are broke down and transported. The runtime algorithm then combines these datasets procedurally and then scatters the rocks based on the combined results. Jesus, they don't do things by half, do they? Is the scattering deterministic? For example, will visiting the same place twice on the same shared server result in rocks in the same place? Just wondering about base building, etc., and how those will be affected by runtime scattering. Yes, it's fully deterministic, because the server and client don't share any information about the planet generation at runtime, but need to perfectly match. We've had nasty bugs in the past where the precision of certain operations on Linux were slightly different, leading to different results, which then means you can smash into an invisible rock. Server says you hit it, but client didn't spawn it. So this would imply the position of rocks, and therefore minables will be the same across different shards as well. If a cluster of something mineable spawns in one location on shard A, then shard B will have that mineable in the same position with the same composition? Not necessarily. For minables we may defer the decision on composition to the server to randomize, because the number of these is very limited compared to the overall number of rocks/trees, which we couldn't hope to send over the network. Vorn replies again, this has some implication for base building, I would think. Is there a chance a mineable deposit or a rock could spawn inside a placed building? Ali Brown says nope, this shouldn't happen because the mineable system doesn't spawn a new rock in version 5. It adds minerals to an existing rock. So the rock was always going to be there, and so will be there when the building was first placed. But we also use volumes to remove scattered objects around buildings, and this will be the case for base building too. So do we just core out rocks in the new system, or will they still split? I would imagine they still split, and then the rock respawns. I have a question that I'm not sure you can answer, but will Genesis also improve desert-type planets and moons, with dunes and generally sandy terrains? Yes, many of the improvements will help desert planets and moons too. Obviously not so much the vegetation scattering, but the terrain detail, geology, rocks, mining, etc. Ali Brown always gives the best answers, eh? This is an interesting one. How is Genesis going to work with the existing POIs on planets that either use the terrain or modify the terrain to get a certain look? I assume you can whitelist these areas and have Genesis regenerate around them, or is it going to take a lot more work than that? Ali says unfortunately we can't preserve the height maps of existing locations, as that would require a large amount of extra memory. We could theoretically use Genesis with 0 changes to the height maps, but then we'd lose a large amount of the visual upgrade too. Yeah, I was wondering about this. What happens to all the POIs when they go over Stanton again? And it looks like they're all gonna have to be replaced individually, I'm assuming. Colt Browning says, so will Genesis also simulate terrain deformation based on weather in real time, or say a huge battle takes place and the land is permanently scarred? Ali says it's mostly concerned with the initial generation of the planets. More dynamic elements would be a future thing. Awesome. Scope shader. Remembering the sitcom from 2 years ago, I recalled this feature. Is this something that's still planned to be added? Hi, the scope shader was added to Star Citizen very soon after sitcom in 2023. It includes parallax, eye relief, defocus, vignetting, chromatic aberration, diffraction, scope shadow, light amplification. Yeah, the scopes are absolutely insane. The cool thing about the scope shader is that it isn't a fake effect that only applies to a special first person model. It's actually always present on every scope and can be seen when examining a scope in your hands or just one sat in the environment, so long as you can find the correct viewing position. However, the initial release missed one key feature shown in the third image above, which is the ability to zoom the image slightly. In the above image, this is somewhere between 10 to 20% enlargement, with the majority of the zoom coming from the main camera zoom. However, the slight extra zoom inside the scope does a lot to help the feeling of a real scope. Unfortunately, it can't be full zoom inside the scope, as this brings about a huge performance hit that even the beefiest machines would struggle with, and would also require a lot of extra complexity in the engine, as we need to be able to support all our complex feature sets in secondary viewports. Planet clouds, space, gas clouds, atmosphere, fog, rain, etc. The reason this smaller zoom wasn't shipped at the time was that it didn't support anti-aliasing or upscaling due to a lack of also zooming with the depth buffer and motion vector buffer. So in practice it wasn't usable. However, since then, the required work has been completed and Squadron 42 now has the extra zoom inside the scope, and this will be making its way into Star Citizen once the latest engine features are integrated over, which could take a while, so I won't be able to predict exactly when. Man, he does give the best answers, doesn't he? Not only is it a deep, complex answer, but it's a positive answer. Reticle parallax. For those of us that use head tracking in FPS, the parallax offset means that the dot is off target by as much as 6 inches inside 5 yards for magnified optics. I have to pause head tracking or risk missing every shot since the error compounds with range. Is this something that could be rectified? Its value add as a gameplay feature is questionable at best. I'll raise that with the design and weapons teams. It might just be they haven't used eye tracking, though I'm surprised this hasn't come up from QA. Also worth mentioning that while we may try to make things physically correct/plausible, the position of the head relative to the scope is not accurate, and never can be, because we effectively simulate a Cyclops, one eye in the centre of head, and also need to deal with some practical animation issues, scope plus large helmet, and rendering issues, clipping, so it might be the parallax is balanced to look okay from the default head position, but moving the head reveals some of the flaws. Regardless, we'll take a look. Dude's a legend. Question for CIG, are solo players being left behind? This is about engineering. I don't think I need to say any more than that. I understand where you're coming from, says Chris Beckford at CIG. I love a big ship too, but we as devs don't join orgs, so I'm left to wander the hangar bays and corridors alone. But they really are multi-crew ships. It's not just that they are more effective with crew than without one. They are actually intended to be crewed. For example, the reason a capital ship has gun turrets is because they are less manoeuvrable than smaller ships. Multi-crew ships just require a different style of play. I can imagine that has got a few backs up. That said, there are some serious downsides to being in a multi-crew ship over being in a single seater, mostly to do with how the turrets work. Also bedlogging. Bedlogging desperately needs to become a multi-crew thing. This person's asking about the bathroom mirrors not working or flickering, or, not having heads and so on. In quantum travel, they stop rendering the interior of your ship entirely, and they open up a window in outer space. I didn't know that. That's actually kind of cool. Chris Beckford, who is obviously a legend for taking on these questions in his spare time. Mirrors and the like can be fickle beasts. They are what's known as render-to-texture effects. Essentially, a second render camera is placed in the world, then draws the environment from the mirror's point of view, and writes it to an image buffer. Then, when your player camera renders the scene for you, it applies the image buffer onto the mirror surface, or the camera feed, etc. This brings some limitations with it. For example, particle effects are updated on the GPU when they are drawn, so if they are rendered twice, they can get a double update. In general, at the moment, particles don't draw in RTT renders because of the issues it can cause. We do plan to fix this soon though. RTTs are automatically more expensive, because instead of rendering the scene once, you're now drawing it once for every mirror, in addition to your main frame. If you're in comms with another player, that's another RTT pass, so you're now rendering 3 times. You can imagine how it can grow, and why, in general, you rarely see 2 mirrors facing each other in a video game. As I understand it, as a performance improvement, sometimes we avoid rendering some RTTs if you're low on system resources. For example, if there's not enough available GPU memory for more textures, or frame rate is already low. This is possibly happening for you. After all, the Polaris is a big ship needing lots of memory as it is. It's hard to diagnose remotely and maybe something different, but that's my guess. Why is the focus on the next Evo patch instead of bringing the current patch to a playable standard? I have heard this quite a lot, and generally a lot more than usual for this patch, and it has definitely grated on the community that instead of fixing the bugs and getting things working, they have just moved on to the next Evo patch and put the fixes in there. And there's been a lot of things going wrong. And given that they said they were going to slow down and make things playable, it's understandable that players have this concern. Missions having a 50% and that's been generous chance to just not function. The loot tables are all over the place, missing spawn boxes, non-interactable loot boxes. And there's been a few other things that have been putting off a few players as well, like they've made it completely pointless to board NPC ships as well. Like I haven't seen so many people just drift from the game in one patch before. Well, obviously I have before, but in a while. I mean, a lot of the game loops people found fun have just died this patch. Engine and bugs all just regressed several degrees. And you could say, we've got to get the next patch out, got to sell the next patch bundle, but if you see what's coming in next, like it's pretty bare bones. There's no next one. Most of those missions they mentioned at SecCon, they won't be there. I just really don't see the rush. Bug fixes for the Evo catapult. Locations clash a rehab facility. Elevators are backwards, preventing players from leaving after serving their sentence. Why is that not in a hotfix? Commodities cannot be sold at TDD locations. Key codes and security room doesn't work. This is all 4.4 PTU Evo Cat. The list goes on. This guy Aero is wondering about Spectrum integrations. And we all know the score, you have to sometimes use Spectrum to add friends and things like that. And having some version in the launcher or the game would be ideal, to be honest. Hi Aero, thanks for your feedback and request. We are currently rebuilding the UI UX to address the existing challenges we all encounter with it, especially focusing on the mobile version. As you mentioned, we are working on integrating Spectrum and SC. We are also looking at a solution close to your first proposal with the launcher, so a Spectrum Lite overlay with game client or launcher that provides quick message previews, org chat and basic reply options. There are still technical steps we need to develop and test, but this is where we are heading. Crafting question. In the SitCon demo you showed placing 1 SCU boxes into a section of the crafting fabricator that appeared to support up to a 2 SCU box. If a blueprint requires 6 SCU of iron and 4 SCU of copper, but I only have those materials stored in 32 SCU containers, how would that work in practice? Also, in the 2024 crafting Q&A, you mentioned that some fabricators can output to a cargo grid. Will we also be able to input resources directly from a cargo grid or our ship's inventory? Deck HCIG. Hello, for tech preview the fabricator can input/output from your local inventory, if it's within your hangar. So in your example with the two 32 SCU containers of iron and copper, so long as you have them stored away in your freight elevator, they'll appear as materials to select with the UI. Beyond tech preview, yes, it will be more flexible, being able to connect to a ship cargo grid/inventory for input of materials and output of items. Thanks. It's a pretty awesome answer actually. Homesteading/land claims, how will this work? Really curious to hear the development plans on how instancing, sharding, or just simply in general the devs plan to handle homesteading within the current server architecture, especially when it comes to raiding or defending/attacking across shards and regions. Hello, within a region, for example Europe, a copy of every land claim/base will exist on all shards, so the same land claim cannot be taken by 2 different people. Assuming the owner has opened up their base to the public, you can access their player-run store on any copy of the base, or use their crafting/refining facilities if you have permission to do so. For the stores, the inventory of what's for sale is shared across all shards. However, when it comes to raiding a base, this can only occur on a single shard, Which shard this happens to be is dynamic depending on the circumstances. The easiest example is, if the owner of the base is online and at their base, then the shard they're on is the only shard where this base can be readied. If you attempt to attack a base and you are not on the correct shard, then you will be given the option to transfer to the correct shard. Likewise, a party or org member arriving to defend would be transferred to the shard where it's kicking off, so they're able to help. That's a pretty interesting answer, but I've got questions. Also, like these guys are saying here, what if that server's already full? And like this guy says, what's stopping someone from continuously server hopping to keep their base safe? If I want to raid a base, does it not break the immersion to have to coordinate a group to log out, go to menus, then relaunch the game? Combat logging and mitigating this by seeing if you're server hopping all the time. There are ways, mate, and as shards become larger, say 7,000 players per shard, there should be less shards to jump to, basically, I think is what he's saying there. Yeah, that's definitely something, there's a lot to consider there. I'm assuming once dynamic server meshing comes online, this will be seamless, as if the area where the base, it becomes the active area where people will get transferred to. Yeah, that would be better. More info required. Castle Black. Hi, with crafting tier 0 I have 2 questions dealing with persistence. Will the crafting blueprints be something that gets bound to our accounts, similar in nature to earnables in game, like event rewards etc, or will they be more like items we earn through gameplay like Wigglo, one being a lot easier to lose than the other? Also with minables / materials for crafting, will those be moved to persist between patches, because as of now, things we mine disappear between patches? Hello, yes, the LTP issues with resources is looking to be addressed. For blueprints, they will persist through patches but are not permanently bound to your account like event rewards. So if there was ever to be a full wipe, they would be lost. The exception to this rule is some cosmetic blueprints. The long-term goal with cosmetics / paints is to convert them to a blueprint so they are no longer physicalized at a location like ship paints, or bound to an entity like weapons and armor. If one of the items that you earned in an event is converted to be item plus cosmetic blueprint, then that cosmetic blueprint will of course be permanently account bound. Just to be very clear, a cosmetic blueprint does not craft the item itself, it just allows for that cosmetic to be applied to the item via the crafting UI. So if you earned an event armor with a cool red skin, you could then craft / find / trade for a better version of that armor later on and apply your cool red event skin to it. In low flying, strafing is crucial depending on atmospheric density and is a very important component. But how will the new flight model affect low altitude flying where you have to fly sideways and perform various maneuvers? Yogi Klat responds. Yeah, from what we see from the current new flight model tuning, there will definitely be differences. In general, in Atmo, hovering and 6 depth of field flying will only be possible when you're relatively slow, i.e. below stall speed. Once you're fast enough that the control surfaces start to have an effect, the lateral and vertical thrusters won't do much. First of all, the thrusters are a lot weaker in Atmo anyways, heavily limiting the thrust output. And second, the drag from lateral and vertical movement will just slow you down further. So do not expect a lot of strafing during high speed atmospheric flying. The forces from the aerodynamics are just too strong for that and they vastly outperform the thrusters, like in the real world. That will of course vary between ships. Some ships are better at Atmo flying than others. There are differences in thruster efficiencies, etc. But new flight model overall requires a different approach to low flying as the model has changed. It will definitely be more interesting though, especially considering that you can turn off all flight assists that keep you safe-ish. I really look forward to see Terada and all those other crazy flyers fully utilising this. Yeah, I must admit, it is change, it's big change. This is one of the changes that I'm really looking forward to. And less because I'll have to fight like a jet fighter in atmosphere, which will be cool, but more because there will be a difference between fighting in space and in atmosphere. And also if I come into atmosphere in my raft, I'm gonna really need those VTOLs. And that to me is just gonna be the best thing since cheese and beans on toast. Hey Yogi, that sounds great. The perennial question remains, how will hovering work with nose downing? I remember in CC23 you showed that if you drag the nose off to the side, i.e. trying to aim while hovering too much, the ship will snap back into level flight. Is this still something being worked on / naturally arises. What we showed back then was that the nose steers in the direction of the airflow over the airframe, but that's not a purposeful control, that's just aerodynamics acting on the ship frame. The ability or the inability to point the nose down during a hover depends on the thrust of the thrusters against gravity. New flight model will be a bit harsher in cutting down the thruster efficiencies, so you really feel the difference in atmo. For example, in our current NFM tuning, the vertical Gs of a Gladius in standard Earth atmo are restricted to somewhat around 1.5 Gs. So that's still enough to take off vertically without using boost, but it's not a lot of buffer. You're left with 0.5 Gs to climb. Ships with VTOL will have an advantage here. If you put your ship nose down, you then start relying on often the weakest thrust direction against gravity, and you might have a harder time holding that position. If a ship is heavily loaded, the thruster damaged, or the power assignment too low, the ship might not be able to hold position at all. But also that is just the current tuning, and we will have differences between ships. Dude, this sounds awesome. This sounds absolutely awesome. Struggling to get off the ground because you're too heavy. That just sounds epic. I don't know what else to say. Words are failing me right now. I'm very excited for this change. Not so much quantum boosting, because I'll get the funny feeling we're going to get stiffed on that, and they're going to remove nav speed from the game and therefore reduce the freedom of flight. That's my biggest fear right there. But ships using flaps and having aerodynamics in atmosphere, it's going to be a fantastic change. Anyway, so going nose down in a hover during combat, for example to attack infantry on the ground, makes you more vulnerable, as you have a much harder time to evade with the weakened thrusters. Oh, I never even thought about that. You're going to have to do strafing runs if you're in a fighter. Another win for the raft. And anything with really good VTOLs. For other things like mining, VTOLs are your friend, and we also want to get rid of the requirement to constantly go nose down during landings. But we'll talk about this later. Hope that clears it up. What's he talking about? What does he mean? We want to get rid of the requirement to constantly go nose down during landings. Does he mean entering landing pads? So maybe it means there's some external cameras, landing cameras or something like that. Or maybe it just means that to land in some of these fighter style ships, you will need to nose up, as in to air brake. Either way, awesome stuff. Carlo Nord says, there's one caveat with this though. What about environments that don't have an atmosphere? Or are they just going to be places where nose downing or hovering without dedicated thrusters is perfectly possible versus an atmosphere, but subject to perhaps more wear than expected due to having to fight gravity with manoeuvring thrusters? Yogi says, without an atmosphere the control surfaces will not be active. It's normal thruster flying at full thrust efficiency at this point. If you have gravity compensation enabled, the thrusters will automatically counter gravity, but as you said, that will constantly fire the thrusters and thus expend fuel, increase heat, increase cooling demands, etc. Oh, sounds so good. In the roadmap roundup, if you didn't know already, Nyx has landed in the PTU and is currently under Evocati testing. And yes, Levski is in, and Levski is awesome. However, first indications there are that the FPS is pretty brutal. So hopefully there'll be a lot of optimization there before that finally gets into the game. We've got Levski, we've got the Glyceum Ring, and a few other places that are tied to missions and such that we'll get into. Other than that though, there really isn't much in Nyx. Nyx 1 isn't in yet and will come further down the road. And a lot of the missions that we've seen at SitCon won't be in either. However, we do have some stuff to go over. Compiling from what we're learning here with what we learned in the data mine. That looks like an assassination mission, ship to ship, a distress call mission, go and save the ship from the Vandal, and the welcome to Nyx mission itself. Looks like you're searching a lot of nearby derelicts, looking for parts of a security passkey so you can enter an asteroid base. There's also mention of ambushing a leader for intel, landing in a hangar and meeting with a contact, and defending a Polaris from a Vandal attack. So there looks like a lot of stages to that, and it sounds like it's going to be, another showcase, permanent mission within the game. So hopefully they can get all that up and running. There's potentially a few build-up missions leading into that, retrieving intel and such. You're basically looking for a bunch of black marketeers dealing in Vandal parts that have been linked to the illegal Vandal experiments happening at ASD's Onyx facilities. The Shattered Blade. Sounds like exciting stuff. And some new commodities. Lindinium, Organics, Sevrilium and Torite. It's possible some of these will only be found in the next system. Coming back to more official tentative releases for 4.4, we have one new hairstyle and 11 new facial hair customization options that should have you looking very majestic indeed. There's a new medium Battletech armour, and again cross-referencing with the data mine, think there's going to be 5 colour variants of this, but we don't have eyes on yet. And we also have a Wicklow variant, which is pretty wild, not gonna lie. Me like. A couple of new ships added to Wicklow, the RSI Meteor and the Guardian MX, with upgraded components and a unique base livery. Some Max Ox neutron cannons got an art refactor for size 1, 2 and 3. I don't remember these guns being in the game. Unless it's a typo and they mean the NDBs, but yeah. Definitely says cannons. And the exterior freight elevator card has been updated to also include Stanton. Interstellar hauling missions, they're getting tested right now. They're on tentative, so basically hauling between Nyx and everywhere else. Hopefully they'll manage to squeeze in a few other things as well. The shotgun pistol, triple down. Yes, bolt action, mag drum, triple barrel, all in a buckshot pistol. Let's go. The boom tube. 3 rockets strapped together in a tube releasing a single deadly payload. This weapon has a high spread and an arming distance, leaning into its chaotic, unpredictable nature of finding the sweet spot distance. Ah, that's interesting. So it needs to be close enough if you want all 3 rockets to actually impact and not too close, or they won't arm after firing, I'm guessing. Or maybe it won't fire at all. Let's quickly now go over the monthly report, and I mean just the high tier items. Early design considerations for a boss variant of the Yormandi. I thought the Yormandi was a boss. You mean that's not the boss? Interesting. The animation team have been discussing dog capture with animal trainers. Facial animation team has been pushing to complete content for the returning ATC character mentioned in September's report. For ships, the Aegis Hammerhead and the RSI Aurora were continued to bring up to modern standards. The Hammerhead has had blast doors added throughout the corridors and updated component placement. The Aurora is currently waiting downstream support, particularly for audio and VFX, as these features were some of the oldest in-game assets. I don't know why, but that's the thing I'm most excited about in the whole game right now. The Hull B is currently being prepared for its white box review. The Drake Ironclad and its command module progressed well into grey box. Geometry and lighting updates to the modular kits helping set the interior tone throughout. That is a possible screenshot of the inside of an Ironclad. 4 unannounced ships. The first is on track for its final review in early November. The second is art complete and currently with the downstream teams, and the third an upcoming variant past its Lord Zero review. So possible Clipper, possible RSI Salvage, and possible Kruger Wolf L22. Art was also completed for an all-new ship before it continued down the pipeline, with paints being created alongside a full pass from QA. Oh yeah, one of those has to be the Hermes as well, right? Possibly. So it's maybe this one that's the Clipper. Another new vehicle, the Greycat UTV, which was briefly shown during the introduction of the STV, entered its white box phase. And finally, for the UK team, pre-production kicked off for the Anvil Liberator. Let's fucking go. This phase is before official production begins and aims to get a solid base for the wider team to use for further estimation and concept requests to aid smoother delivery. Today is a good day. The North American team progressed with 2 unannounced vehicles. One is currently with downstream teams for closeout ahead of its final review, while the second is approaching its grey box review in early November. Damn, that's a lot of ships. Elsewhere, the RSI Perseus had a large-scale developer and Q&A playtest this month to check its robustness and intent in combat, which was a great success. Oh, I really know how to tickle my pickle. White box work continued with the Drake Kraken, with more developers moving on to it as projects were completed. Things are definitely heating up around the CIG shipyards these days. That puts the potential ships appearing at IAE something like maybe this. The RSI Perseus is obviously locked in. The RSI Hermes, which looks to be a cargo variant of the Apollo. The Greycat MDC, which I think can launch missiles. Don't know where I got that from. The Kruger L22 Alpha Wolf. Let's see what you think that's going to be. Guessing it's just a variant, but with a different loadout, possibly laser. The Drake Clipper, which to the best of my guesses, is this on the silhouettes. I'm guessing it's a cargo since it's a clipper. And the RSI Salvation, which might not be the salvage ship, this one. And might indeed be this, whatever this was, because it's still not showed up either. So, very interesting stuff. Core gameplay teams push forward on the inventory revamp. This involved working on the equipment area, where players can add weapons, mods and equipment, including tractor beams and medical guns. We are bringing back the ability to have 2 weapons stored on your back, whilst you hold a third one in your hands. Yes! Fucking yes! That's great news. That's such pain in the ass. The team also worked on different inventory tabs and floating item slots, and kicked off the early stages of capital ship repair, rearm and refueling. Oh, no way. I wonder if that just means, you know, like through your mobiGlas, or if they're going ahead with manually refueling and manually rearming. I'm gonna go with the former. Honestly, at this point, I just hope it's the former. The other one would be cool to have, but right now, just mobiGlas. Both. If you've got items on your cargo grid, they can be transferred to your ship. In the meantime, before we have fuel as a storable resource, you can just drain some from the mothership. That would be fine. Several missions were adjusted based on the salvage career developments. For example, missions should now spawn ships that give fairer rewards for the buy-in, time and effort invested. If ever there was a piece of good news, that is it right there. In mission design, the devs also added several more locations, including the space-based ship graveyard, which was updated to support the ship ambush archetype. Additional ship graveyards and UGFs were added to generate more missions, supporting the increased player cap and new players. Awesome. The mission team also completed their work on the Accept From World feature. This will allow players to accept mission from physical items in the verse, instead of having to just use the contact broker. Wickelow's Imperium is the test case for this. This will enable missions outside of mission providers to improve immersion. For example, it could enable a physical jobs board offering missions around a specific location. They also set up the new courier tech at existing locations to make them more robust when they go online. System to system hauling progressed well, and these missions will expand the hauling career until Reputation V2 is implemented. Some existing missions will move over to the next system with new narrative elements, while other older content will return, including missing person, black box recovery and retrieve cargo. Oh, happy days. Oh, happy days, oh, happy days, oh, happy days. Welcome to Next Mission Progressed Well too. Finally, a design review was done for Siege of Orison, with the team looking at player feedback and seeing how to improve the event to support instancing. That's a very positive chunk of news from the mission design team. Well done, guys. I know I've been a bit of an asshat towards you in this video, so I apologise. I know you guys are down there in the trenches digging hard for us. Thank you. The network team progressed towards the first iteration of their new server meshing technology, which will be moving into initial testing in November. While players will not experience any significant changes, this is an important first step in laying the groundwork towards dynamic server meshing. Holy buckets. It is happening. Anyway, that's about all for this week's news. Tune in tomorrow for some full spectrum warriors. From this day forth, we will be changing the format of that show. Instead of just taking posts from general, we will be looking some more at game ideas from the community, as well as the feedback section, just so that things are a bit more curated and less negative, or more constructive, one of the two. So hopefully you'll join me for that. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, morning, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Appreciate you tuning in. 07 guys.